Hi guys, thanks for checking out my blog post this Friday, and today we're going to talk about calling turkeys with nothing but your voice. Now, I've killed a lot of turkeys over the years, calling them in with nothing but my voice, and it did take me a long time to learn to do it. I've been calling this way since I was a little kid, and I used to have to practice really hard at doing it. But I used to use all the modern calls like everybody else, and I still like to use some other calls once in a while. But, you know, calling a turkey in with your voice, especially the first time you do it, that's a real special thing. And the first time it happened, it was just like, wow, I can really do this. And then from then on out, I was just enthralled with it to where I didn't want to bring any other call. I just wanted to use my voice, and that was it. And a lot of times I do bring a secondary call in case something happens, you know, my voice starts to feel strained, or, you know, maybe the birds just don't happen to like that sound that day. You know, we'll switch up and give them a different sound to come to. But if this doesn't come easy to you right away, just realize that it may take you a long time. You know, after the years that I've put in doing this, now it comes really easy to me, but it wasn't like that in the very beginning. So what we're going to work on first is just your basic Yelp. And so it's very hard to explain how to make these sounds, but I will do my best. And so what I'm doing is basically squeaking with my throat, and I use the back of my tongue. I basically lift the back of my tongue up to shrink the size of my throat. And so then from kind of the top side of it, I can kind of squeak with it a little bit. And it's something you just sit around and play with the noise and just go. And it's almost kind of up in here. You know, inside obviously, and it's kind of a little bit airy, and so you won't get a lot of volume to begin with, but it's just that very light. Just focus on getting the sound out first. He's gonna sound like an elk call too. So try that, and then once you start getting to where you can find that sound, then you can start putting a little bit of tone behind it and a little bit of cadence, like. And so then as you get more comfortable with it, then you can jump into more volume and do a little bit crazier things. Purring is something that I think is actually a lot of fun to do. It's not very hard on my voice at all whatsoever, and the turkeys really seem to like it. Like if you get them to where they don't really want to come in and you give them a little bit of a purr, sometimes they just perk right up and they'll come on in. And that's also a good technique to use if you have a gobbler that's got some hens with it and the hens aren't letting them come over. You might be able to just give them some clucks and purrs, you know, kind of scratch the leaves with your foot a little bit, and they'll just think, oh, there's some food over here, and that might entice the hens to come over. So to purr, it's the same thing. It comes from the back of our throat. Some people have gotten to where they do it almost like a motorboating with their mouth, where they... And that does work. I don't care personally for the sound that it creates, but it does work. I like to do, again, that high back throat sound, where it's almost a squeak, and then I do like a gargling sound with it. So it's like that, but it's with the squeak. So it's a lot of times after I do purrs, I also like to cluck. And so I do clucks the same way. It's that high throat, you know, lift the back of your tongue, you know, into your throat area and let out a squeak. But what I do is I shut my mouth, and then as I let that squeak out, I let that air actually force my lips open, and it gives it that kind of little bit of a smacking cluck sound. So it goes like this. So then I'll purr sometimes and go. But it's that smacking sound that your lips forcing apart actually gives it a lot of that realism in the sound. So next, when I cut and cackle, I do that with the same clucking technique, but in the first one, the first couple might come off as that lip smack just as the clucks do. So, but then I finish out by like saying pick if I can, you know, while I'm kind of squeaking doing that thing. So a lot of times, like if I yelp and want to go into a cackle, I'll start with and go. So, and then just, of course, you know, cutting is... So it's just that control to that squeak and opening and shutting your mouth. But I like to say pick while I'm doing it. It seems to make more sense to me, and it gives me the tone and the kind of pronunciation, if you will, of the sound that I'm looking for. So again, it just sounds a lot like. Next, I like to use a Jake gobble sometimes, and it's not supposed to sound good. A Jake gobble, Jake in itself doesn't gobble really well. If you've heard some Jakes gobble before, they kind of sound like they started to gobble and somebody threw them up against the wall. It's very short, and it just doesn't sound really good. And so that's really important in your Jake gobble, that it actually not sound like a big dominant bird, because in a situation, then I don't sit out in the woods and do a whole lot of gobbling, but it does become important sometimes. I've had mature gobblers out there, 60, 70 yards, and they're strutting back and forth, and they absolutely will not come back in. And if I give them a Jake gobble, a lot of times they drop that strut and they will just come barreling in, because they figure somebody else has come in and took that girl, and I'm going to go kick his butt. And so when you do the gobble, it's more tongue, and it's just essentially like blah, 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 but using your voice in it. So, it should be high-pitched, sound kind of stupid, and be short. And lastly, one thing that I have worked on for quite a while is learning how to do a real gobble like a mature bird. And there is a purpose to it, and when I like to do it, it's to actually try to get a bird to shot gobble. If I'm in an area that I just know that there's birds here, there has to be. I've seen them here before, but I can't figure out where they're roosting. Owl hooting's not working. Crow calling's not working. A lot of times, and the last thing I really want to do is I don't want to sit there and yelp, because I don't necessarily want a bird coming to me yet. But not only that, but I feel like a lot of times they hear that and they don't even answer it as much as they just come in. So they might perk up and they might be interested, but that doesn't necessarily make them gobble, especially down here in Florida with these Osceolas that don't like to gobble a whole lot. But a big thundering gobble a lot of times gets birds excited and they answer it. Have you ever seen a bunch of turkeys out in the field and you get one that gobbles and then the rest of them gobble, and then one gobbles and then the rest of them gobble? They all just get excited. So that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to initiate getting the rest of them to gobble. So it looks kind of stupid, but it sounds pretty good, especially in the woods. In fact, I've got a video clip where I kind of did a gobble at the end of it just so you could hear what it sounds like. But what I do is I do kind of like the purr thing, but it's a little more open, so it's like that. And I shake my head back and forth and actually let my cheeks and my lips flop, and that gives it the sound that I'm looking for. Again, it looks stupid, but there's not a whole lot of folks, standing around watching you do it either. So if you practice it and get it to sound good, and you can't get a turkey to shot gobble for anything, gobble at him once and see what happens, see if they won't answer back to you. So anyway, it kind of goes like this. What I'm going to do is do a couple yelps, maybe a cut or something to kind of get into it. That a lot of times puts a little context to it. It gives like as if the turkey is actually gobbling at something, and that so they get excited. They might hear that cutting or yelping, and then you gobble, and then they just let it out. So it goes like this. So now I've shown you how I do some of my calls and explained them the best that I can, but a lot of times it's really just something you're just going to have to practice in doing it. And it's not so much voice as it is controlled squeaking, so just kind of keep that in mind. But I want to take you out in the field, and we'll set up and show you a couple instances where I've called some birds in using just my voice.